I was cruising the internet late last night, and I came upon an article saying that you're the sponsor of a proposal in the California legislature to impeach President Bush and Vice President Cheney, and I wanted to give that proposal as much coverage as possible, so we're going to talk about that. Now, apparently the authority to do this was cited in the article as Section 603 of Jefferson's Manual of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives. Tell us what that document is and what its legal standing is.
Well, it provides for some rules in terms of how Congress functions, and that particular section, which has been rarely used and never used in a presidential arena, sets up a process whereby each house of a legislature could pass a resolution for impeachment of an official, in this case the President and the Vice President of the United States, and that would, by transmitting that to Congress, trigger the impeachment process.
Regardless of who controls the House of Representatives?
Yes. Now there's no guarantee under a Republican control that this moves forward once that transmission is there. But essentially it starts the process were Congress to choose to move forward with it.
Okay, so it sort of lights a fire under the Congress to move in that direction.
Exactly. In essence, it would have the same effect as a member of Congress introducing an impeachment resolution.
Okay.
This would do it for them.
And has that already been done? Didn't John Conyers already introduce a resolution to impeach the president?
I'm actually not sure of that, if he actually introduced a formal motion to do that.
But so this would have the effect of essentially the state of California presenting that proposal to the House.
Yes, and there are a couple other states that have done this. Essentially, we were all working on it at the same time and not aware of each other. But Illinois and Vermont has also proposed the same thing.
So it's pending in their legislatures as well.
So, and it's my thought that if a number of legislatures start passing impeachment resolutions and they wind up on the doorstep of Congress, it's certainly not a sign of great confidence in the president and the administration.
Do the rules say that only that a minimum of one state needs to do it, or does it say that more resolutions will be introduced in more states and it carries more weight?
Any state introducing a resolution, in theory, would trigger the process.
Okay, let's talk about how it's going to happen here in California. What's the vehicle for this? It's an Assembly joint resolution.
Yes, it's AJR 39, which was a different bill. We amended it with the impeachment language, and it now has been put into print by the Assembly Rules Committee.
And where is it in the legislative process?
It is at the very beginning. It is in the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee could either choose to hear it themselves, or they could choose to refer it to another committee, another policy committee for hearing.
Okay. Does it list what are essentially the equivalent of articles of impeachment? Does it cite specific high crimes and misdemeanors or other infractions by the president? Well, tell us what those are.
It focuses on the president misleading the American people and Congress by misstating the threat in Iraq, in essence to defraud the people and get us into the war that we're in. It also focuses on torture, on illegal surveillance, on revealing the identity of CIA operatives, on federalizing the National Guard, among other things. I may be missing a clause or two.
Could you focus on the two issues having to do with the president acting in a way that he believes he's entitled to, but that the law may not say he is, in particular the violation of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of 1978, what it requires and what the president did and what he said about what he did?
Well, it's clear that in my mind, that there's no constitutional justification for this level of surveillance. Now, obviously, the president would argue otherwise, but this bill and starting the impeachment process, were that process to go forward, it would allow for hearings and for the members of Congress to investigate whether or not indeed he went far beyond the boundaries of constitutional authority, as I believe and as many others believe that he did.
Could you say something specifically about the leaking of classified information, which may or may not have been instantaneously declassified at the decision of the president? He's the chief decider, he says. Before it was leaked, or maybe it was declassified after it was leaked. What do you know about the timetable of the White House efforts to discredit Joseph Wilson through revealing information about the run-up to the Iraq War?
I mean, honestly, I don't know anything else beyond what everyone else has read in the papers.
Right.
It just seems that to reveal that kind of an identity endangers both the individual personally and these confidential programs that are going on, and to do that for political purposes seems to be something that would violate the Constitution and the intent of
right.
it.
Specifically, Scooter Libby, who's at the focus of this case, was not accused of leaking the name, but using a national security briefing paper that was classified and then declassified by the president and then released by him. And I was wondering if you knew anything more than I do about the sequence of those events, and whether it was in fact actually declassified at the time it was leaked, or whether that was done retroactively.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't have any inside information on this,
Okay.
on any of these factors. So they've all been discussed pretty extensively in the press, but I don't know anything beyond what is out in the public domain.
The article that talked about your efforts say that you wanted to preempt further violations by the president by doing this. What kind of further shenanigans do you have in mind that the president might be in a mood to undertake?
Well, of course, each time one of these things has come up, one would think, well, my God, nobody could ever get away with this as president, and indeed they do. Since we've introduced this, we found out about the millions of phone records and what the government is doing in that regard. So who knows even what they might attempt. But specifically, my great concern is that the president may initiate nuclear war. And something as dangerous and unacceptable as that seems almost inconceivable in modern times, and yet almost everything else this administration has done seems inconceivable as well. So I want them to be more accountable. I want them to feel that the American people are breathing down their neck a little bit, and that we're not just going along with each unconstitutional thing that this administration may be doing.
So there seems to be a cycle. There's a revelation, there's a hoo-ha, and then there's some hearings, and then the senators sort of grill the culprit, and then we move on to the next event. And there doesn't seem to be any accountability in a larger sense for a pattern of quasi or actually unconstitutional acts by the president.
Well, there's no accountability and there's no consequences. And the president seems to think that he can decide that he's above the Constitution and above the law. He's the decider in every case, as he said. And I think the American people and Congress should be the deciders of whether this administration can violate the Constitution with impunity. And at least this is a little bit of a consequence, a little bit of a pushback on behalf of the American people.
What of that part of the American people that you represent in Sacramento told you about this effort so far? What kind of reaction have you been getting?
Well, the reaction that I've gotten has been almost universally positive. Now, that may be a function of the fact that the mainstream media has either refused or not been aware of these actions and have given very little coverage to it. So the three resolutions in all three states have been not widely covered, but we're getting very little pushback either by email or in the Capitol or in the district. We're generally just getting hundreds and hundreds of emails and calls and support. Okay.
Now, whether impeachment is raised in the House of Representatives through a state joint resolution on a state from a state or by a member of the House itself, we can assume that things aren't going to go very far forward as long as the Republicans are in control of the House of Representatives. Talk about the election that's coming up in November and the prospects for a Democratic takeover of the House of Representatives, and how much and what role resolutions like this and similar ones could play in mobilizing voters to turn the Republicans out of power in the House of Representatives?
Well, I'm certainly hopeful that these impeachment resolutions play a role, because it certainly shows that the issue is percolating up from the ground up rather than from the top down in Congress, that these are starting to pop up in various states, and that there's a tremendous amount of unpopularity for both the president and vice president because of these various unconstitutional actions. Surveys are showing that they're at a stunningly low level of popularity for an administration that was just reelected not that long ago. And I'm hopeful that this will start to crystallize that opposition, that people will say, well, the Democratic Party isn't just gutless, and they aren't just saying, well, these things are going on, but there's nothing we can do about it. And that because of this pushback, people will feel more empowered to take on the Republican Party and these kinds of actions.
So it would have a value in itself, as well as a symbol that the Democrats are actually going to do something about the state of affairs.
I'm hopeful. I mean, I think this will have a positive impact on the election. There are others that feel the opposite and are afraid to see us move forward with this.
Talk about the politics within Sacramento. What's the timetable? What kind of reaction have you been getting from your colleagues there? And what do you expect the dynamic will be there? Will all the Democrats vote for it, and is that enough? Does it have to be a simple majority from each house? What's the politics of getting this passed in Sacramento?
Well, it's a complicated question. Now, it only needs a majority in both houses, and we have a substantial majority.
We, the Democrats.
We as Democrats. Right. So I don't think that's a problem. We've generally gotten positive feedback, but there is a question of whether the leadership will want to move the bill, because we have a number of bipartisan issues that we've been working on, although the most significant of those is now dealt with, which is the infrastructure bond, which is an effort that the Speaker has been leading for quite a while, finally came together, and that's been passed, and it'll be signed by the governor.
You're supporting that? You want people to vote for that as it was passed out of the legislature?
Generally so. I mean, nothing's perfect, but I think the state has fallen down on maintaining our infrastructure for decades, and by and large, it's a good idea. There were some elements of it that were problematic. Generally, those were taken out in the process. So I think it's generally a pretty good idea.
Okay, so now that that's out of the way, how important is comedy with the Republicans to the Democratic agenda in Sacramento?
Well, I think lesser importance. We have one more big bipartisan issue, which is the budget. That'll possibly be dealt with in record time. There aren't big areas of disagreement any longer. It's an election year. Everybody feels a need to work together on the Republican side, which is usually the side that pushes back and makes it difficult. So I think by June 15th we pass a budget, and then we really have no other major bipartisan issues that are critical to deal with.
Oh, could the Republicans say that they won't cooperate with passing the budget if the Democrats are going to push forward on the impeachment resolution, or do they have no power to do that?
Well, they could. I just don't even think there's enough focus on it right now. My suspicion is the Republicans don't pay any attention to this resolution until after the budget is done. There's not a lot of talk about it. It's not a front burner issue in Sacramento right now, and resolutions have no timetable, unlike other bills. So we could wait till after June 15th and then move it forward.
How much longer will the legislature be in session after it passes the budget by June 15th?
We'll be in session until the end of August.
Okay.
So there's plenty of time to take this on.
All right. And what can people who feel as you do that the president needs to be impeached do to get in touch with you or to show their support for this for Assembly Joint Resolution 39?
Well, I think the best bet is to contact their individual legislators and any others that they choose to contact, and let them know they'd like to see them co-author the legislation and support the bill as it moves forward.
Well, have you thought through the scenario by which the Democrats gain control of the House in the fall? The president and vice president are impeached. Nancy Pelosi is elected Speaker and as third in line for succession becomes the President of the United States?
Well, that would certainly be a wonderful scenario. I'm not sure I think that's overly likely, but certainly anything's possible. At a minimum, I would like to see all these shenanigans ended and see Bush and Cheney with much less control and much less power, and that means takeover of at least one of the houses. I would certainly be delighted to see this go further and to see the president and vice president actually be impeached. I think they've committed enough crimes and overridden enough constitutional areas for 5 presidents to be impeached, much less one.
Impeachment is essentially equivalent, though, to a congressional indictment. They would still need to be convicted by the Senate. What do you see the prospects for a Democratic takeover of the Senate or a Republican-controlled Senate voting to convict the president and vice president and remove them from office?
Well, again, it's an area that's hard to predict. I mean, who knew that a president would almost get removed from office because they lied about their sexual activities? I mean, it certainly seems laughable in the context of the huge, in my view, very criminal actions on the part of this administration that have cost thousands of lives, billions of dollars, destabilized a region and possibly the entire world, and yet it's a very political process. So the same senators that voted to impeach one president and tried to remove him because he lied about sex could turn around and say, well, this is not a big deal. So a few thousand lives, so $100 or $200 billion, what the heck? It's very hard to predict, but anything's possible.
All right. Yeah, you're termed out. What are your plans after this fall?
Well, I haven't really determined that yet. I've got enough legislation of great interest, like the bill we've been talking about, that it's been hard to make the time to focus beyond. I've given some consideration to a state senate run in 2008. If that seat winds up being open, I know there are some modifications being talked about to term limits. So whether that position is available or not, I'm not sure. Otherwise, possibly I'll work for a nonprofit or possibly another elected official. That remains to be seen.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for talking to us today on California Politics Today.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you for including me.